sports governance in India. And it looks to understand what we should expect in sports governance reforms and the kind of responses to expect is there. Please join me in welcoming the panel. Begin with this Mudgal. Retired in his capacity as the Chief Justice of the High Court of Punjab and Haryana. Also headed the IPL Probe Committee which investigated the allegations of corruption during IPL 2013 and is currently heading FIFA's Governance Committee and Review Committee. Next we have Sharda Ugra. Senior editor for ESPN in India. She has been sports journalist for more than 25 years and has written a lot on sports governance and reform for popular academic publications. Next up we have Mr. Abhinav, 2008 Olympic Gold medalist. He has been part of the committee appointed by the Ministry to draft the National Code for Good Governance in Sport and was also a member of the Olympic Task Force. He is currently the chairman of the Athletes Committee at the ISSF and most recently was appointed a member of the Athletes Commission of the International Olympic Committee. I'd like to invite Mr. Deepak on stage, chairman of the FICCI Sports Committee and the president of the Indian Council of Science and Private Limited. And the last panelist is Mr. Gopal Sankaranarayanan, an advocate of the Supreme Court of Medallist. Gopal specialized in constitutional law. He was appointed the secretary to the Justice Lodha Committee and has been at the heart of attempted cricket reform and is presently engaged in reforms in both the archery and football administrations. The panel will be moderated by Desh, Gaurav, Sekhri. Desh is a dual qualified sports lawyer and helped set up sports law practice at Jetsagar Associates. He is currently a consultant at the NITI.
Well, first of all, thank you to everyone for organizing this, I think, second edition of what is one of the best thought leadership programs for sports law, policy, and beyond. I especially want to thank the organizers. I especially want to thank the organizers for putting Jeff on first, because I'm going to focus on the outcomes and plagiarize all your key points and use them for my questions. This panel actually speaks for itself. No introductions are required. And I'm going to, without any further ado, I'm going to just launch into the questions and the BCCI matter. I think we cannot escape sports governance being dictated by the outcome of how the judiciary has been involved to whatever extent with determining how sports should be governed in India. No better person to ask what the key takeaways from the BCCI matter are than Justice Mudgal.
Thank you. Look, this started from the IPL scam. What was alleged to be match fixing and conflict of interest with the chairman of the Bcci's son-in-law being a part of the committee, being involved in betting, which is forbidden under the rules of BCCI IPL. That led to the probe. But that was not the first litigation in India on sports. That was in 1989, when 13 cricketers were banned from cricket after taking part in an unauthorized match in West Indies. A petition was filed in the Supreme Court, and Justice Sankaranarayanan happened to be a great cricket enthusiast. So his tough stance compelled the BCCI to backtrack and withdraw, because they did not want a writ petition to investigate the affairs. That's how it started. I was the lawyer who filed it. But this outcome, the IPL orders eventually led to a fairly comprehensive structure done by Justice Lodha. Maybe one or two factors needed to be corrected, but by and large it was an extremely comprehensive all interactions were done. And because of that, it led to the formation of the panel. Of course, one of the questions which always occurs is why should the judiciary be running these sports? No, you're right. Judiciary should only step in and bend the Lakshman Rekha and step back after the governance structure. Judges are not qualified to run sports organization. Most of them may not be even aware of half the rules, if not all the rules. So it doesn't matter. Enthusiasm is not enough. You must have knowledge also. So this is what led to it. They have been diluted, and Gopal will surely tell you how much they have been diluted and what is the impact of that. But nevertheless, a structure has emerged which has fixed the tenure.
With the other structures in the body, because that's the only way where you'll effect change. By just revolting all the time and by complaining, it will not solve problems. It will raise issues, and there is a place and time for being angry and being grumbling and complaining. But at the end of the day, you've got to get work done. You have to find ways to find practical solutions. Athletes have a tremendous amount of issues. In the last presentation, it was pointed out, specifically in India, it's all the presidents and the higher ups micromanage the whole setup in running associations. Now, a president would not care about a hotel reservation or a flight reservation or getting that done. That's where athletes commissions can come into place and effect change. Change, maybe small change, but change which is very meaningful to athletes' lives.
Thank you for that. I'll come now to Mr. Jacob. Now, what we know for sure is that the judicial process is a clear part of sports governance. From the private sector side, is that a concern or a comfort?
No, there's no question about that. Transparency, accountability, hygiene, both in administrative functioning of the leagues, plus the fiduciary responsibilities, the public purpose, and the finances, etc. Very clearly, that's what will bring in the investment. You're not going to go and put in thousands of crores into any sport if you don't have a clear window of where it's going to go and who are the people running it. So there is no debate on that. And the more that happens, great, because just recently, for example, the Delhi High Court has appointed a COA, an administrator, to look into the affairs of the All India Kabaddi Federation. So that happened last week, and whatever the outcome is, I think it's a good thing. Somebody felt there was something wrong, complained, courts looked into it, and they've appointed this COA. So I don't think it's a bad thing. However, I think Jeff put the context very nicely with his study. Different federations are in different stages of evolution. There's the kitchen table federations, there's the boardroom, people who are trying to move somewhere, and then there is the Bcci, which is at the furthest stage of evolution. So, we shouldn't try and, whether it's a court-appointed administrator, or whether it's the Supreme Court itself, or the High Court, or judges, it's a one-size-fits-all may not really work. And, a small a Kabaddi federation with about 5 people managing. For example, we know it because Mashal is running the league, for example, or the badminton federation, or the tennis federation, or the table tennis federation. They just don't have the time, resource, and the money. First of all, they don't even have the money to run a league, to organize a tournament. They're literally surviving from season to season, literally. So, I think some of the suggestions that he made in terms of the role of national sports federations in sort of communicating and educating and creating awareness, etc., is an important facet. That's one. Second, when these court-appointed administrators or the judiciary looks into things, or there is a report that is being generated, I find it quite surprising that they would stay away from the very people or the organizations that have broken the bank, put their entire balance sheet on the line, and run the risk of underwriting the entire sport for the country. So the term that Gopal used was corporate tentacles. Well, without those corporate tentacles, there wouldn't be any sport fundamentally, or we'd be back in the 1960s or 70s when national federations would put one athlete and they would win one gold medal in 20 years. Today you have the most vibrant potential for growth ecosystem of sport because the private sector has come in and put its money where its mouth is. Whether it's on just acquiring media rights or running leagues or building talent, we have broken the bank. You don't put in 25 to 30,000 crores in a span of 4 years because you think that this is some fanciful expedition you're on. It's a serious business. Sport is first a business. It has to be economically viable. Then comes the issues of governance, transparency, accountability, etc. That is parallel, simultaneous, needs to be done. So I think before everyone sort of starts playing holier than thou, at the end of the day, corporates are an essential or a necessary evil, if you want to call it. And so are politicians. They do have a role in promoting the sport at a grassroots level. They have a role in promoting the sport at a national level and at an international level. They do play an important role. And I think, therefore, it's very important. Also, I think the scope and ambit of whichever committee that is appointed, I think they should stick to governance, transparency, hygiene, and not get into scope creep into larger sort of public interest subjective issues. So, for example, the Lodha committee report came out with something on commercial advertising and said you should have breaks only during lunch, tea, etc. Of 1 day is an IPL, the most valuable properties. Why would I pay 75 crores for a 1 day if it's going to be lunch, tea, and the reason why cricket has so much value is simply because it's a fantastic advertising proposition that I get a break every over versus football, which will never be a great advertising proposition because you can only take a break during the one break. Hockey and none of these other games will reach the sort of levels of value that cricket generates because it's just a natural great value proposition. One state, one vote. Like it or not, one state, one vote is asking for arbitrage and horse trading. Why would Manipur be interested in cricket? They're not. Why would Kerala be interested in cricket? They're not. Whether it's true or not is that, but the fact of the matter is that you're opening up the doors for horse trading. So I think these are the few. I'm sorry I threw the cat amongst the pigeons, but I thought it was necessary.
Like I said, my job could not be easier. Sharda, this is not by mistake. It was by intent. It was all going to come to you.
No, I'm no pigeon. I must confess. No, what was your question about?
Please.
Okay. The entire matter of sport being a business and the importance of sport in industry, in sport, and is very, very, everyone's grateful to sponsors and advertisers. But what I think the non-business people who deal with sport in a different way, whether they're fans, I think they have to understand that. Would like the business community to understand that business is a part of sport. Sport is not a part of business. And that's where, as Jeff was saying, the governance issues in sport are fairly complex. Do we need judges to be sitting in, with all respect to all the legal luminaries in the room, do we need legal intervention in sports issues? Should the Supreme Court be talking about it? Are there not other more important national issues? Of course there are. But the reason why the court has come into it was because of failure of governance. The reasons why the Table Tennis Federation is poor, or the Volleyball Federation is poor, or whoever is poor, is because their governance models did not adapt in the way that the Bcci adapted to how it was. What was always discussed with me when I was a journalist, I'm a journalist, sorry, when I was much younger, was someone says, why has the BCCI got to these shady sponsors, man? Why doesn't Tata sponsor the BCCI? Or Birla, okay, that's not a branding thing, but, Tata is a big brand. So, they said, why are all these shady sponsors coming up? Who is, I can't remember who the DDCA had this Gutka sponsor on there before Justice Mudgal stepped in. So that was the question, and you didn't think about it from a as a journalist, you didn't think about, okay, it doesn't matter, the sponsors are there, it doesn't matter who they are. Why have they come here? Because they've arrived at a certain degree of shortcutting, what we say is shortcutting. So we needed legal intervention, and we will still need it, because we are seeing that there is an opposition to establishing a sort of a basic template for governance in sports in India. And as Jeff said, being a journalist, I'm taking notes all the time. He said that good governance doesn't get you a gold medal, but it can lose you. Bad governance can lose you one, and that's what's happened in Olympic sport across decades. The person sitting next to me will say, "Hurry up! I need company. I'm not allergic," is what he said in an interview. That he wants there to be more. Abhinav wants more gold medalists next to me. Governance is fundamental to how Indian sport can succeed. And if it's not going to be self-regulatory, it has to be imposed from the courts. I mean, the fact is, I think everyone here who has ever been to Firozshah Kotla needs to give a standing ovation to Justice Mudgal for getting a profit out of DDCA from a test match. A profit from a test match ticket. DDCA never had profits. So if the BCCI is a very well-functioning organization, how come the DDCA didn't make profits every time they held a test match? So that is my response to, and again, one more thing, quickly, why does Manipur want to play cricket? That is, or Kerala, whatever, that's the fundamental job of sports organization, is to take their sports to as far as they can, as wide as they can. Another person who's involved a lot in cricket administration once said to me, does the BCCI have an audit of how many Indians play cricket? Not that we have to be sort of regulatory and organized and regimented, as in how many people are involved even in club cricket India. Do we have figures? Do we have data on how many people are playing? Now, fortunately, we know how many registered, domestic players, juniors that there are, but they didn't have it before. It wasn't there before because you were working. This may be, with no offense to all the corporate people here, and I don't want to drive any sponsors away. That this is what sports governance is about, is that take your sport to as many places as you can. And you can understand when you see other countries and how they try and push cricket everywhere, all kinds of communities. Why will no kid in Manipur want to play a sport where he can make 10 lakh playing in an IPL as part of a team over 6 weeks or maximum 3 months? Why will no parent want their child to be playing cricket? Of course they want. You're not going to give them if you're not going to go there and see who's available, how are you going to know whether they want it or they don't want it?
So, I would like to continue on this topic and maybe get some more thoughts. I think we'll come back to that in a couple of minutes. But you've led into a very interesting point, and actually, this is something, even growing up in the field of sports law, you come across quite frequently, and Justice Mudgal alluded to it as well. Governance is, of course, critical. But the point is that if you look at international precedents, you look at FIFA, and more importantly, you look at North America, you look at Major League Baseball, you look at ice hockey, you look at most of their sports, the courts have judiciously stayed away from governing and regulating sport. There's a very fine line between governance and regulation. I think that's always been recognized. And I would like everybody on this panel's take on what you feel are the lessons from international precedents, and do they apply in the Indian context? Sure.
I'll give you only one example. You may have read that the president and secretary of BCCI travel first class and have an allowance of $750 per day, apart from taxi and hotel. Well, being the chairman of FIFA, today I get $150 a day and business class travel. I think this is the kind of international example you must take. And surely, I think That is more than sufficient because breakfast is always free.
I think the North American precedent is completely different from what India is going through because it's a professionalized sporting economy. They have their own problems in North American sport about many things. But it's like basically you had, their sport is run through leagues. Their four biggest sports are run through these leagues. Their Olympic sport is run through self-sustaining, Abhinav will correct me here, organizations that don't need money from the government. Here, the Indian government is who have basically invested in sport, and the fact that we have a history of sport and of Olympic participation is because the government bought into it right at the beginning and pumped money in, and all these organizations that were set up around organizing, like kitchen table governance, as Jeff's fantastic slide explained everything to me in one slide. All context, everything. They're using that kitchen table governance and relying on the government as a sort of a shortcut to actually doing anything constructive or on their own. A lot of these sports organizations. I'm not saying Kabaddi. Kabaddi has actually been brilliant because they adapted very. The moment they got a chance, they literally were willing to change rules to be able to do it. And it may have started with kitchen table governance, but they understood that what we are getting is something. They may have ceded some power to, I don't know, Mashal or Star Sports or whatever, but they've just got it. And now why do kids want to play Kabaddi is because it's a good livelihood for them. And in India, I think all over the world, when sport becomes a livelihood, you just have to be able to govern better.
Well, I just like to say that I think in India, change will not happen unless it's mandated. We need a law, as simple as that. Otherwise, I'll just have to wait for my grandchildren to become grandparents.
I'd like to give Deepak the last word, so I'm going to give it. I'll come back to you.
No, I don't think there's any debate about, again, governance is required, we would put in money if there's governance. But again, I think there's perceptions and then there's reality, and there's fact and there's fiction. And people need to kind of figure out what the difference between the two. The only reason why sport has become popular in India is because broadcast networks have gone and taken it to each and every part of the country. We run sports channels in 8 different languages, which is not an easy task. Whether it's in North America, Europe, etc., it's run 1 language or 2 languages at maximum. So whether it's cricket or football or table tennis or badminton or international tennis or kabaddi, etc., our aim as a corporate organization that's investing in the league or investing in the network is to take the sport and send it to each and every part of the country across different platforms, whether it's the digital, whether it's television, whatever medium we can. And that's our aim and objective is to increase the reach as well. Hopefully, because of that, it will drive youth aspirations of. That's how youth get inspired. They watch the sport. We formulate heroes in that sport, and people then want to emulate it. That's how we call it couch to the field. Get them off the couch and get them on the field. So I think it's important that people recognize that without television broadcast and without corporates investing in the leagues would not exist. Period.
I think there are different perspectives that we have to keep in mind, and the idea of governance is standing above all of those interests and to create a balance. You have the corporates who say, look, we are putting the money in, the aim of sport is money. That's the first time I've heard that, and I'm shocked to hear it. The aim of sport, in my view, is not money. Now, there are the individual players who want victory. As Jeff pointed out, you have 2 of them on holiday for a year because they wanted victory. There are some other players who possibly want money in a big way. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I'm saying there are different interests. Now, there are people in governance who want to ensure that they remain happily in governance, like just Mudgal pointed out, the honorary president and honorary secretary, as they kept reminding us, we're not on salaries, but honorary people who spend crores of Bcci money when traveling around, staying in 5 stars, etc., etc. Now, when you have all these competing interests, and what was stated in the committee's report, somebody has to look at the interest of the game. Now, interest of the game balances not only the interests of these entities, which includes the corporates, etc., but I think largely the interests of the people who are watching the game and who are so passionate about it. So I want to just correct. The suggestion that we had given was, since 95% of the BCCI's money is coming from IPL, as far as that is concerned, we are not touching your advertising revenues, etc. It's your business. But in test matches, when every single minute matters, and you're not making that much money out of every ad break after every over, and some guy gets out on the last ball, you go off to an ad break, I want to see him walking off, I want to see the new guy coming in, I want to see the passion, I want to see Sachin coming into bat, I want to see the people clapping. That's what the passion is. Without the people watching this, these sports broadcasts will have nothing. Let's accept that fact. It's because people want to watch it, and their interests are primary in this. Now, if their interests have to be protected, you have to have a very strong governance model in place. And I completely agree with Abhinav. There are distinctions we have to draw here as well between, say, an individual sport like tennis, where you have the four slams. In golf, you have the four majors, stuff like that. And team games where you're dependent on representing your country, where the regulation and the governance aspect has a big role to play. I'm sure Abhinav himself would admit that he was in a sport which required possibly as much support as he wanted from the government, maybe from corporates. I don't know how much he got from either of them. But it's important that we have it imposed. If it's by law or if it's by court, it has to be imposed, because our lessons over the last 70 years, sitting with an empty cupboard without individual gold medals except for this one, shows that something has to change.
One, under no circumstances did I say that profiteering or money making is the only goal. I said sports has to be a viable business proposition. Then it becomes a viable career proposition for people. And that will not happen unless somebody invests deeply in that sport, whether it's the sporting ecosystem, or whether it is skill development, or whether it is talent scouting. That is the reason. That's why I'm saying that the investment part is extremely important. And nobody is going to invest unless there's a proper governance mechanism in place. That's one. So let's be clear about that. Second, you talked about test matches. Let's be very clear again, let's not get perception and, reality mixed. Test matches, I pay the same amount of money to BCCI for test matches as I pay for one-day internationals. I make no money on test matches. Yet I continue to broadcast test matches in the same way as I would, with all the most qualitative feeds and everything, and there is very little to zero money to be made on test matches. So, I am not in the business of profiteering. I'm in the business of ensuring that everyone gets to watch as many different types of sports as well as the various formats that they have, and that is my aim. So, people need to understand that I don't get any joy or of money, doing test match broadcast, because there is no advertising to be made there.
Let's stop broadcasting test matches and let's start a shooting league. I think that's
I think Sharda, you want to say something?
No, I think I'm going to be tired of our voices. Only one thing to say. I look forward to a day when every sportsman in India travels in the same class as their officials. Not cricket. Every sport.
Just very quickly, again, there is no denying the fact that broadcasting is central to how professional sport works, functions. It's the engine that runs a lot of professional sport around the world. A lot of Indian interest is centered around, outside of, say, cricket, for example, is centered around Olympic sport and how we do every 2 years, every 4 years. Okay, 2 minutes left. Quickly. I think when Gopal was talking about the tentacles of corporates, and I don't think. No. But I'm just trying to explain to the audience here. I don't think he was referring to corporates as being evil people. What he was trying to say is that there were individual interests. I'll tell you as a journalist, there is obviously someone in the broadcasting company that got along well with someone in the BCCI and therefore and was able to issue a little stenographed report into a newspaper to say that the sponsor's going to pull out, the sponsor's going to pull out, there's panic. And I think that's what he was referring to.
That's correct.
Rather than, that all sponsors are evil, they are not, they are the greatest thing. So that was basically, I was trying to just clarify here in case anyone wants to know about how the media works, particularly when the cricket broadcasting happened. Me and Neeru, who's sitting here, are very happy to talk to you after the session.
So one of my greatest fears has come to pass. We've completely motored through the time. We have, I think, a total of 5 minutes left. I do want to open it up for a couple of questions, but first I would really like to close this with sort of a fast forward. So let's say we're a year away sitting in the same position, and 10 years away sitting in hopefully not the same position, but some changes would have come about. What would be the short-term and long-term governance changes that you would like to see in India next year and 10 years from now?
Short-term would be transparency. Long-term would be development of sport at the local level. I mean, cricket comes because we have so much cricket, because of enthusiasm. People who do not have playing fields. You see now small town cricketers are making it big because they have passion. Now, this is the short-term thing, they do it. Long-term is create stadia all over the place. India has huge football potential. We were semi-finalists in the Melbourne Olympics. And if the infrastructure is there, I'm sure in football, we came down from 140 something to somewhere in the 90s today. And it's regrettable that our team did not go to the Asian Games, because that exposure would have done us wonders. There's Korea playing there, please remember, there's Iraq playing there. These are the teams who played in the World Cup. So it would have done us a world of good. Japan.
In 1 year, you want all the state associations of the Bcci to fall in line with what the Justice Mishra said a few weeks ago. That is my wish. I don't think it'll happen, but that is generally what I wish for. And in 10 years, I think a lot more gold medalists in a lot more sport and it'll come from good governance is what my dream is.
Short term, make the sports code stronger. Long term, enact law.
Apart from 1, 2, and 3, what they said, that's fine. That's a given, like I said. But I think sporting infrastructure and access to sporting infrastructure. I think the big problem is even if city kids have a problem in understanding if they want to play football or the badminton or tennis, etc. They don't know where to go. I think in Bombay it's the same problem. And there are these fantastic, startup apps like GoSporto, etc., that have been doing a fabulous job of just aggregating all these, sporting infrastructure so that people can go online, book, make leagues. They have player auctions. They have all kinds of fabulous stuff. So I think access to sporting infrastructure and creating adequate sporting infrastructure, I think, should be.
I completely agree with 1, 2, 3, 4. I think it would be necessary in the short term that we can try and ensure that if courts have to play a role at all, they are done with it and get out of it. Because I've had enough criticism of lawyers and judges saying you guys shouldn't have anything to do with sport. We don't want to have anything to do with sport. This is thrust upon us because the governance models are not working. So let's hope that in the short term, that the governance models will be in place for all these organizations and we can move forward. I think in the long term, of course, we're looking for medals and awards and stuff like that. But I think really engendering a spirit of playing sport among our populace, I think is very, very important. And that's why I don't agree with the fact that you won't get cricketers in Manipur and Kerala. Unless you put money in there and you put infrastructure in there, you'll never know. It can't be a circular argument that, look, there are no players there, therefore we're not building stadiums. Win the stadiums, they will come. So I think it's necessary for us to ensure that we can never say in a country of 1.3 billion that we don't have an archer in Manipur or we don't have a tennis player in Jharkhand. We have everybody everywhere. And I think we need to ensure that the cream comes to the top and we get more people to play. So what I love about Delhi is we have public places where we can just pay and play, right? And DDA has ensured that. I would hope that more cities and small towns, etc., just engender that and spirit of playing comes up.
I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pretty much sums up our entire discussion. Do we have any type of questions or should let's 2 questions, please. If you could keep it brief to the I don't know who's passing the mic. If you could just introduce yourself and who you'd like the question to be answered by, that would be helpful. Thanks.
I'll be really quick. I'm Dhruv. I'm a player representative. My question's for Gopal. Just now with the governance issues that you spoke about, how close are we to the Player Association A with the Bcci and the representatives kind of association or guidelines for that? Thank you.
That's a question for Vinod Rai because he was supposed to bring that into place. Okay, so it was expected to be brought into place much earlier. This didn't have to wait for more litigation because nobody was taking an issue with the Players Association. Even the BCCI guys were saying, "Yo, we're happy with that." The other thing was, I think I want to just seg on to what Abhinav had pointed out, that present players find it difficult to form associations. That's why we consciously recommended only former players, because otherwise there's a conflict of interest issue, which is the heart of how these reforms came about. So we had recommended a steering committee of 3 people at that point of time. Unfortunately, one of them had become the India coach, Kumble. So they could have had any other steering committee, and even now, it can be a steering committee for the Players Association alone, separate from the COA. But that was expected to come into place separately, and they were supposed to form that. That's still not happened, but I can't answer that. Lodha committee's remit is complete. I'm out of the picture. I have nothing more to do with this.
2 more questions. Let's start with it.
I have a question for the gentleman from FICCI. We talked about sports broadcasting and leagues, but are you comfortable with broadcasters being part or being shareholders in a league or in a sporting this thing? Because that brings up a whole set of new questions. Secondly, Hockey India League, the money came, but did it go to the players? Badminton Association of India, the money has come through sponsors, but has it gone to the players? That's why, don't you think that governance and strict governance protocols should be there and transparency?
2 parts to your question, I think. One is the potential conflict between being a broadcaster and also organization that potentially runs the league. For example, Kabaddi, yeah. But in Kabaddi, for example, Mashal was the organization that had the rights. The people who originally started Mashal, Anand Mahindra, Charu Sharma, etc., did it out of their own personal funds. Now, when they got Star as a network to broadcast, the whole question was, where do we want Kabaddi to go? If we wanted Kabaddi to reach the same level as cricket, which is what the aim and the goal, what Jeff had pointed out, every organization needs to have a goal, and the idea was to bring another second sport or second cricket sport in the country, and that we thought was Kabaddi. However, their level of investment and their level of what they felt would be required was very different from what we felt would be required. So if they were willing to invest, say, 5 crores, then we said, if you wanted to come to the level of cricket, you need to put in a couple of 1,000 crores. Which is how the conversation came about us also running the league. Now, if we did not run the league correctly, you would not see the ecosystem of Kabaddi. For example, nobody knows the fact that there are no Kabaddi stadiums in the country. So we were actually going to places and building out Kabaddi stadiums. Everything from air-conditioned domes to mats to neon lighting, the works. Most of the Kabaddi players come from rural areas. They are peons in the government. They are railway police constables, Haryana police, etc. Work on salaries as low as 2,000, 3,000 rupees, etc. If we didn't encourage big industrialists to come and take up create franchises and own these players, the sport would not have reached where it is. So while you're right, from a pure technical governance point of view, there could be this whole question that arises of conflict. But unfortunately, without that, I wouldn't be committed to invest in this sport. Because I have been able to transform Kabaddi into a spectacle, into something that people love to watch. From, the sandpits and we've turned those players into heroes, into gladiators. So it's an entire 360-degree cycle. But to answer your question, maybe 15 years from now, when the sport becomes, a sport as big as cricket, for example, maybe you will want to have some kind of rules that, ensure there's a, separation of powers, conflict of interest, etc. But right now, it's still kitchen table. We're still kitchen table, to use Jeff's, words, moving towards executive, line of management, professionalism, etc. Or the second part of it was that the players are run by the franchises in the leagues. So there are team owners. There are team owners who run the leagues. To answer your question, I backstop the franchises, right, by providing minimum guarantees so that they remain economically viable. However, the teams pay the players. I'll give you an example just to answer this question. When we started the Kabaddi League, there were players that would earn maybe 5 lakhs a match, etc. And the auctioning was going at about maybe 25 lakhs for a player. Now there are 6 players in the Kabaddi League that are in the 1 crore bracket. So if you are looking at from a financial aspiration point of view, players in the Kabaddi League or in the Badminton League or in the Table Tennis League are reaping the benefits of their talent and skill now because there are these franchise owners, etc., who've put in the money and are willing to look after the well-being of those players. But prior to that, when they were under the federations alone, the federations didn't have the kind of funding and resourcing from the government. The government gave Kabaddi League 25 lakhs a year to run Kabaddi across the country. What will AKFI do with 25 lakhs?
No, the question is, Kabaddi Federation gets the money from the broadcasting rights, a big chunk. Does that go in improving, let's say, camps or self-sustenance of a federation?
Of course. Yes.
It's not happening in hockey and Kabaddi. Most of the national camps are being run by the government and paid for by the government.
Okay, so I mean, that's where we talked about governance and accountability, etc. I can't go in and start running, the federations. But I hear you. The money is going to the federation. The federation has to utilize it. And that's why you talk about governance and regulation and administration, etc.
Well, I think that's all the time we have. Thank you again. That was a great learning experience for me, and I'm sure for the entire